Okay, so this is episode 3 of Debugging with Chrome. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the device toolbar, which is really useful for debugging issues with different screen sizes and different resolutions of screens. It is still an emulator, so it doesn't solve every problem. So it certainly helps you find a lot of issues before you do your final tests on actual devices. So we're going to use one of the Elementor pages again as a test to work through this. We're going to use our Chrome DevTools again. So I'm going to bring that up with an F12. And here's our DevTools. Now, the previous episode, we looked at the element selector at the top left of the DevTools here. What we're going to look at today is the device toolbar just next to it. So if we move our mouse over it, the little tooltip comes up and it tells us we can also bring this up by pressing Control-Shift-M. So I'm going to click on that and have a look at what we've got here. So at the moment, I've just got this in responsive mode, where I can move this handle backwards and forwards and watch what happens with the screen. Okay. Now, what you want to do is look at how this looks on actual devices. By default, when you click on this drop down up the top here, there's a bunch of stuff that's already available and you can add your own. I've added this custom laptop one. I'm finding that there's a lot of either the cheaper laptops or even some of the Apple notebooks that have the viewport of 1366. So it's a really good one to test and see how it's going to work on a small MacBook. Now, to edit these, all you do is click on the edit down the bottom here. And there's our devices there. We can also get to those through going into the settings and scroll down to our devices over here and click on that. It takes us to the same place. So we've got the one that I've created, got all these unticked because I don't want them. And we've got a few ticked here because we want them in the list. So anything we tick in the list is going to stick it in this drop-down list up here. What I'm going to do here is add a MacBook Air. So if I click on Add Custom Device and call it MacBook Air. Now we need to find out what are our specifications. So what I'm looking for is the viewport and the device pixel ratio. Now I'll explain that when I find that. So all I've done is a quick search on MacBook Air 13.3 viewport. In fact, I'll rename that. Oops, where are we? Back here. MacBook Air 13.3. So we know because there's different sizes, I believe. I just did a search on MacBook Air 13.3 viewport. And the first result gives me all the information that I need. I could click into it if I want to, but I don't need to. So what this is telling me, it has a 13.3 inch screen, has a native resolution of 2560 by 1600 pixels. It has a viewport of 1280 by 800 pixels, which is a ratio of 2. What that means is that when you look at a web page in a browser, the viewport that's represented to the browser is 1280 pixels wide. The actual resolution of the screen is 2560, which means for every viewport pixel, it actually draws 2 screen pixels on the screen. This is where the problem comes in with when you define element sizes using pixels. So if you've got an image and you tell it it's 300 pixels wide, on high resolution screens with a ratio of 2, a pixel ratio of 2, it's going to draw that at 150 pixels wide because that's the actual pixels. If you have a 3x screen, it's going to draw that at 100 pixels wide. So the size of your element that you've specified in pixels looks different based on the resolution of the screen. It ignores the viewport settings. It appears that's the case anyway. That's what they're talking about, 2x and 3x. So 2 times, 3 times. That is the reason that, in my view, you should never ever use pixels for sizing elements. Always use relative units. So if you want something to be relative to the container that it's in, you can use a percentage. So if you want something to be half the width of the container, make it 50%. Half the height of the container, make it 50%. So that's with percentages. If you want something to be a relative size to the whole document, use REM units. Now, REM is relative to the top level document size. And strangely, when you set the top level document sizes in pixels, it seems to respect that in the viewport. And then if you use REM, so for example, if I said something at the document level was 16 pixels, and then I use 2 REM as a measurement, it's actually going to be 32 viewport pixels. That's a brief explanation on that. The other relative unit that I would recommend that you use, if you've got a full width screen and you want it to be a percentage of that, you can use VW. So if you want to say 30% of the VW, you can make it 30 VW. If you want it to be relative to the full display height, you can make something, say 30 VH, to make it 30% of the height. So that's pretty much how that works now. So what we understand about this MacBook Air is we need a viewport of 1280 by 800 with a pixel ratio of 2. So let's go back and do that. There we go. So it's going to be 1280 by 800 with a device ratio of 2. Add that. We now have a MacBook Air 13.3. So when you change any of these options, you'll note that the zoom changes. The reason for that is trying to fit it into this available width. So if I drag that down there and then change to, say, laptop, change back to MacBook, it's on 75% now. So it's trying to fit it in within that available space there. So you then have to click on the zoom and set it to 100% if you want to see what it actually looks like at 1280 pixels wide. So that's pretty much what it is going to look like on a MacBook Air. If you want to see what it looks like on an iPhone 12 Pro, click on that, change it to 100%, and that's pretty much the iPhone 12 Pro view that you're going to get. Now, one other thing that I would strongly suggest is when you change from one device to another, is that you press the F5 key to do a full reload. The reason for that is that sometimes when a page loads, there could be some JavaScript that runs, which based on the screen size, it might move some things around or scroll to a certain point on the page, which you're not going to notice if you're just changing this here. So basically change from that to a, say, MacBook Air, press the F5 key. By doing that, you're going to get the best representation of what that's going to look like. All right, so the next thing I'm going to look at is the responsive mode on here. So I'm going to find something that's got some columns. I'm just going to look down here, get some columns. So I think these are in columns. I want to find where these breakpoints are. What I can do is set that to responsive. I can see I've got 4 columns wide. If I grab this handle on the right and I move it, keep moving it, things are dropping around, moving around. Can be a bit tricky if you've got a lot of moving content. Still got 4 columns. Now I've got 2. At what point did that change to 2 columns? What you can do here is you can really try really hard to get it right with this handle, or you can go up the top here, and again, this is going to scale when I do this, and you can go, okay, at what point did this change? So keep clicking, keep clicking. Okay, so this is using the standard Elementor tablet breakpoint of 1024. This changes to 2 columns, which means the CSS is changed at that breakpoint. So what's the mobile breakpoint where that turns to 1 column? Drag, there we go, got 1 column. There it is there. So 763, no, keep going, keep going. 767, 768, I've got 2 columns. 767, I've got 1 column. So that's our breakpoint for everything turning into 1 column. So that's a really easy way to find out. Now, the 1024 and the 768 are the default breakpoints in Elementor. So when you're using the responsive mode in the editor, this is the breakpoints that it's going to base this on. But you might have your own breakpoints, or you might have imported a template that's got some media queries that change the way things lay out at different breakpoints. The way you would find that is go to that element and say, for example, you might have this text here, and that might change at 600 pixels. That might drop in size, or at 300 or 400 pixels. That might drop in size. You can use this method of dragging the right bar, and then using this for your fine tuning, and find out what is that breakpoint when that text changes size. Okay, so that's the way you can find breakpoints with this. So the next thing I'm going to show you is when you look at a device and you want to get a screenshot of that for your portfolio or whatever you want to use it for. But you don't want just this visible area, you want the entire screenshot. There's actually some really cool extensions for Chrome, but you don't need them. It's actually built into Chrome. So within here, what you do is, say we've selected we want a MacBook Air screenshot. So click on our three dots down the right here, hit run command, type screen. I'm going to move this up a bit so I get a little bit more view of that. So if you want to capture an area screenshot, if you click on that, it'll bring up a tool where you draw a marquee around what you want to capture. If you want to get a full-size screenshot, so you want the width that's visible, but you want the full height of the page, you use the full size. If you want to get a node screenshot, which is the selected element or selected node that you clicked on, which can be useful, you'd use that one. So let's say we want to use this in our portfolio. We want to get a full-size screenshot. So I'm just going to click on that. Just wait for it to generate that screenshot. There it is, and it's going to download to our downloads here. If I look at that in the folder, then right click on it, and I'm going to view this or open this with Photos. And that is our full-size screenshot. Okay, now some of the stuff like lotties and that may not display because of the JavaScript, or you may be at the wrong part of the animation for that. But this is pretty much what you would do. So let's say we want to get a mobile screenshot. So I'll select a mobile, like the iPhone 12 Pro. We don't need to worry about this, but we'll just change that to 100. Go to our screenshot. So hit on the three dots, run command, screenshot. Oops. And do a full-size screenshot. Go in the folder, and we'll open that with our Photos. Exactly what you expected it to be. So a big, long mobile view of that page. Now, the only other thing I'm going to show you here is when you're looking at a device, there's another little button up here, which you can click on, which is rotation. So let's say on an iPhone 12, we want it to show it vertically, we want to show it horizontally, or a MacBook Air, change that to 100%. So that's what it looks like in landscape, and that's what it looks like in portrait. Now I'm just going to do an F5 on that because this is overlap. So I'm going to go just press the F5. Okay, and I can see here that Elementor have a problem with that heading overflowing on a iPhone. So they've got some overflow issues here on an iPhone which they need to look at for this particular page. So maybe they've done that on purpose, but I can't see why they would. Anyway, so that's how you identify any issues with overflow. So that's the end of episode 2 on how to use Google Chrome DevTools device toolbar to troubleshoot any responsive issues on devices before you need to test on the actual devices. So I hope that's really useful and helps you in developing mobile responsive web pages.